Good afternoon. I hope everyone had their afternoon coffee. It's been a great day, but we have an even better panel coming up. So I hope everyone is excited to learn about the intersection between entertainment and tech. We have our lovely panelists here. I'm going to have them kick off introductions. Please tell us who you are, what you do, and anything else you want the audience to know.
Who are we starting with?
You.
Damn, I knew I shouldn't have said anything. Hi, everyone. Randy Ahn. I work at Roku, which is the #1 streaming platform in the US, Mexico, and Canada. We've got over 60 million active accounts. My role is responsible for subscriptions on the platform. And so basically, I'm the guy that's trying to get you to spend more and more money and purchase more and more subscriptions. I've been with the company for about 5 years. I'm Korean American as well, and I'm excited to be here.
Yay, thank you. Tina?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tina Trankiem. I'm Vietnamese American. I'm currently 5 years at Meta as of today, formerly Facebook, if you guys don't know. Sorry, what else was I supposed to talk about?
What do you do at Meta?
I lead entertainment and music partnerships marketing at Meta. And what that means is I help big media companies and artists and labels create content for the platform.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Awesome. Hey, guys. I'm Rebecca Liao. I'm co-founder and CEO at Saga, which is a Web3 protocol for launching what we call the next 1,000 chains in the multiverse. So you've all heard about the metaverse. A multiverse is basically just a metaverse that is spread out across many decentralized protocols, and therefore you can probably tell we are an infrastructure layer specifically for gaming and entertainment. Saga is my second crypto startup, so I've been in the space for a while. And until 23andMe comes back, I am Chinese American.
Hi, Jason Kwong. I am Chinese. Probably the best way to say it, I was a chief strategy and digital officer for Redbox, where I basically led their digital transformation and launched a number of streaming services. I am now the chief innovation officer for a company called Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment, which recently acquired Redbox. So my job now is to essentially look at basically the future and innovate, stand up an incubator for the company, which has been largely focused in the AVOD space.
All right, thank you so much. I think it's imperative that we start this conversation just hearing about your experiences as members of the AAPI community. What does it look like in terms of your current roles in the current industries you are in, and how has it sort of evolved since you started your careers in entertainment and tech? So whoever wants to kick it off.
I'll kick it off. So I feel really fortunate to work at Meta, that it's the first company I've ever worked for that actually I've never worked with so many Asian people in my entire life. and Vietnamese people at that. Like, it's actually really empowering when you see people that look like you, work at the same company as you, do the same things you do, and you don't feel so isolated. And so I really value that, and I think what it helps me do in my everyday is to make sure that there are many diverse voices represented across all the content that we create on the platform. We have such strong communities across Facebook and Instagram and building for the metaverse. And it's really important that people like us see ourselves in those stories and how they connect with people. So I'll leave that there.
Yeah, for me, I'm pretty new to the whole AAPI support thing, and so this is a new experience for me, and something that I've really just started to get more involved in. I would say in the last 2 years, just with everything going on, it's hard to ignore what's happening out there and what you're reading in the media. So I just decided to put myself out there and get a lot more involved. The experience has been fantastic. I love opportunities like this to not only tell my story or lack of story, but it's also just a great way to meet others and network and learn about other people and their backgrounds and their stories. And so when it comes to work, up until about 2 years ago, and I was talking to Jason about this earlier tonight, I didn't put a lot of thought into being an Asian American in media. It was never on the forefront of my mind as I was going through my career. And actually, at the time, there weren't a lot of Asians in media, and so it was hard to find mentors that looked like you and that had positions that you wanted to grow into. There was, startups like Yahoo with Jerry Yang, but it was always from a tech background. It was never the content or the business person. And so, I've been in many meetings where people assumed I was the engineer in the room rather than the business person in the room. And I'm sure others have experienced that as well. Yeah. And so, so I'm still learning about all this, but happy to be more and more involved.
Well, we welcome you.
Well, thank you.
Who's next?
I'll go last because I have a different perspective, but go for it, please.
Yeah, I mean, I would say a very similar experience to Randy. I don't know that working in entertainment early on, I didn't have the same experience that Tina did. I mean, there were not a lot of Asian faces. In fact, Randy and I shared an office. I was probably the most that had worked with another Asian person in entertainment for a long time. And so even my days at Warner Brothers or Netflix or otherwise, it felt like that wasn't a part of your identity that you really put forward. And I feel like a lot of that's changing, and certainly on the distribution side, you're not the ones that are really selecting the stories or creating the stories. So it's been a great, it's been wonderful to see that as we're on the distribution side, seeing more of those stories come forward that look a lot more like us and represent us much better. It has been a great experience. I would say the best thing I did was a long time I was on the content acquisition side, but when you're buying content, again, you're buying the things that are available. I did try to buy the Awkwafina web series Talk. And I had locked up.
Oh no. And
Go90 came and doubled what I offered and took it out from under me. But that was the only time I felt like I really had that shot at at telling someone's story, an Asian story. So,
Rebecca, I feel like you have a very interesting background. So what was your experience like?
What's interesting is with respect to Web3, which I'll talk a little bit about that. That's sort of what I know best at the moment. It's always been very international. Crypto is just by its nature a very international business, and partially because of the borderless nature of the technology, but also because it's a culture that really encourages anonymity. And so oftentimes when you interact with other people in the industry, you don't know who they are. They're usually some sort of NFT or cartoon, and they're competent in their own way, but you have no idea who they are. So you just hope that they're not a terrorist. That's a joke. But what's interesting though is that when you look at the stats, very clearly Asia dominates the crypto market, far and away dominates it. And in terms of the technological innovations that come out of Asia, in terms of the respect that this industry has for Asian culture, it really is leaps and bounds beyond what many industries can boast. But I would say that that sort of diversity, if you will, of viewpoints has masked something that I think is something that we can improve upon in Web3, which is that unless you are an Asian project, you usually do not rise to leadership positions within a Web3 project if you are of Asian descent. So if you're Asian American, rising to leadership in an American Web3 project, or you're European, so on and so forth. So that's something that this industry can definitely work on. But it's an interesting dynamic because in so many ways, Asia, Asian culture, Asian innovators, Asian engineers are very dominant in what we do.
Thank you so much. I forgot to mention this earlier, but we are going to have a Q&A session if anyone in the audience does have questions. So let it marinate. Think of some good questions for our panelists. They're more than happy to answer them at the end. So I'll check back in with you all then. But all right, let's dig into some of the fun stuff. I'm curious to know what are some of the biggest trends you're seeing in your respective industries, whether it's entertainment, media, tech. What does the industry look like now? Where do you see it going? I guess since you're next to me, you're going to be picked on a lot.
Got the lucky hot seat. I love it. So the one thing that's always top of mind and seeing on a daily basis is discussion around consolidation and aggregation of content and subscription services and all sorts of services, not even ad supported as well as subscription services. And so when you think back, 4 or 5 years, some of the largest subscription services, video services on the platform were HBO, Showtime, Starz, Cinemax. But now you've got these large major SVODs, global SVODs, purchasing or acquiring content, acquiring entire other companies, and merging them into these bigger and bigger services. A prime example is HBO Max, which recently got acquired by Discovery. They've announced that this summer they're going to be merging those two services, which are both massive services, into a single new subscription video on demand service. That's going to happen, continue to happen, and You think back on the cable days back in the day, back when you started off with broadcast, and then you had hundreds and hundreds of cable channels. This is sort of the next evolution of that, and it's happening in streaming, and it's really about consolidating content and owning the user or owning the customer. We're going to continue to see that trend continue to evolve. My prediction is there's going to be 4 to 5 major SVOD services dominating globally in the next couple of years.
Jason, I feel like you can chime in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think consolidation becomes natural, right? Even as a consumer, there are only so many services that you actually can pay attention to, but at the same time be able to sustain a customer's attention for a long period of time and retain them as a customer, you have to keep feeding that content beast, and it becomes a very, very expensive game that a lot of players are playing. And I think it's, obviously we're going through some interesting economic times, and as we're going to an economic downturn, and everybody was chasing this Netflix-style valuation, right? This multiple that is no longer there, right? This the idea that the global TAM, when Netflix started to show that the growth wasn't there, everybody has to re-rationalize their business a little bit, right? And spend a little less on content, spend a little less on how much they spend to acquire customers. And so naturally you're going to see a little bit of that contraction. It's a little bit of the sign of the times. It's interesting as folks start to think about where my side of the business is focused a little bit more on is on the subscription side. People are averaging up to 7 subscriptions, right? And we're going to start seeing some of that contraction as people start to tighten their pocketbooks. And so there's been the rise of AVOD and fast channels of free content that people can also consume. Obviously, Roku's staked a big claim in it. It's an area that we've been continuing to grow. But I would say that industry consolidation, by the pure fact of too many services, is just going to be natural on a go forward.
Tina, what are you seeing in the tech space?
I think, so to give some historical, I was at Hulu before Meta, and before that, I'm totally going to date myself, I was at MySpace. So I think the trends that I've seen is actually this like democratization of content creation, from social networks to streaming to now also social networks. You have like storytellers that tell stories in like many different formats. I think really hot right now is like short form video. But everyone's a creator. And I think the technology of being a social platform helps so many new storytellers really grow. And then also like feed into, do you get like a deal at like a streaming network? Do you go to network or cable? And I think that's really exciting. I think technology also just like helps to globalize like a lot of the content too. Like the content that we see now is not the content that I saw like 20 years ago. And it's really exciting because I think it plays a really important part in representation as well. So yeah.
Rebecca, I feel like Tina just gave us a couple buzzwords we need to talk about. Democratization, globalization. So dig into that. What are you seeing in Web3?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's exactly what I noticed as well. Democratization of content, it's fascinating because, Web3, most people know Web3 as cryptocurrency. And it's true that most major projects have some sort of crypto or token that allows you to gain access to that particular project, and you can play with it. Every single crypto cycle comes up with something new that really busts the industry open. So the last time around, it was something called DeFi, which you guys might have heard that term, but it stands for decentralized finance. And so the crypto summer, so the good times of 2020, 2021 was really fueled by DeFi. That's more in financial services. What we're seeing now is a huge wave of gaming and entertainment. And I think early on, the sort of basic understanding was, well, there are these things called NFTs. They sort of act like collectibles. They are digital assets that can follow you anywhere. You own them. You control them. They're not controlled by any centralized entity, by any studio, or anyone that's outside of you and your wallet. But the secret about NFTs is they became so valuable because we were in a bull market where everything went up. And so you can appreciate your assets during that time just because everything was going well. However, what we have to think about now, because of contraction, it's happening in crypto as well, is what value do you actually offer to people with this technology? And I think the reason why you're seeing this trend into gaming and entertainment in Web3 is that we have figured out it is the democratization of content creation. It is returning content back to the community. What many gamers will tell you is that once a game is released and there's a community that forms around it, the gamers and the community members will always love the game more than the creators or than the original creators or the publishers. They will come up with new characters, they'll come up with new storylines, they'll come up with new gameplay, new designs, and they try to contribute that back to the game. But when they're not in direct control, they have no direct say as to what happens to this game. They feel powerless to do anything about it. And I think the same sort of dynamics bleed into entertainment as well. The next big trend, which is kind of happening now already, but the big bust for the next Web3 trend is really in that decentralized creation of content in games and entertainment projects.
So speaking of globalization of content, whether it's streaming, whether it's technology, whether it's Web3, it's all about reach, right? Reaching the audience, reaching the consumer where they want to be met. When we're thinking about, for instance, I can sit at home in my living room and watch content from South Korea, from Japan, Bollywood, whatever you want, you can watch it at the blink of an eye, right? So as we're moving towards this world where everyone is connected, everyone can consume the content that they want, what are some challenges that you guys are seeing as that unfolds, that future continues to evolve?
Yeah, something I'm definitely seeing is there's still a high importance of localized and local content. And so there's a difference between localized, which is taking often global or mass media content and changing the language and making it available in that territory. But then there's local content. There's content from that country or that territory that is specifically made for that audience. And I think what I don't like to see is sort of the washing of local content. I think it's still really important that there's content that is local and that is meaningful for the people that understand that culture, that live locally, that could directly relate to the content there. But then there's also the idea of taking that IP and then sort of mass marketing it. And so something that we talked about on our prep call that was really interesting is the proliferation of Korean content as an example. And so you guys are all aware of Parasite and Squid Game. But what's interesting is there's actually content being made in Korea where the IP is getting acquired and they're remaking it in the US or in other countries. And so The Masked Singer, which Tina mentioned, is a great example. The Good Wife is another example. These are originally developed in Korea and have been remade by local American media companies and are big hits. But that didn't happen before. That sharing of IP, that influence from other countries is now becoming mass media, which is really exciting, actually. Yeah.
Jason, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for us specifically on the chicken soup side, I think, part of it's trying to tell very broad stories, but unfortunately, you need massive scale. So when you have a big platform like Roku or a big platform like Netflix, you're still able to program for a wider audience. And for us, we find that, when you're still programmed to more narrow audiences, you're always just programming what's at the top. And especially on the AVOD side, a lot of it tends to be catalog content. And so we're always mining older stories within the US, which unfortunately doesn't have the same level of diversity and came from a different time, I would say. I would say on the fast channel side and AVOD tends to be very much catalog content. And I would say that there has been a lot of investment there yet in really bringing a lot of diverse stories and diverse voices.
So Jason spoke about this earlier, but competition, whether it's in entertainment, whether it's in tech, is always growing, right? So how do you think about your roles at your companies and being able to be a leader in the eyes of the AAPI community in surviving and thriving in the industry you're in, despite macro conditions, despite what's going on abroad? Any thoughts there?
I think for us, I sit in a really interesting position where I get to see a lot of the conversations. I get to be on social media all the time because it's my job. And so what's really interesting is you kind of get these signals from what consumers are talking about, and it kind of helps inform, like, do I go work with a Netflix? Do I go work with, how do I bring to light this like Squid Game phenomenon to the masses? How do I really like celebrate that? And I think being in my role, I get to be a voice for Asian content that didn't really exist before, and I feel really fortunate that I work at a company that is really embracing a lot of diverse storytelling right now, because I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I feel like it's like a new dawn of storytelling. There's so many ways to consume media now, and there's so many ways to connect with audiences. Like, I don't think without social media you would have the growth and proliferation of South Korean content, or I don't think America would have discovered The Masked Singer, right? You're like, what is this?
I don't know how proud I am about that, by the way.
I think it's cool. And so I think just continuing to advocate for stories and media that like are bubbling up, and you're really just leaning on consumers to do that, and not just looking like here, like you're looking in other countries, in different communities, and I think there's it's a really nice way to kind of celebrate all the storytelling that's going on, not just in movie theaters, but across streaming and even like creators.
Pretty fascinating the way you can leverage social, just the term you're using for signal, right?
Yeah.
Being able to start to understand where those trends are and be able to see those happening as they're unfolding, as opposed to, picking up on those things as they become phenomenons, right? Like, you're able to really get an early pulse on it.
Yeah. I also want to call out that Rebecca and Tina, they are literally on the bleeding edge of where entertainment is going, and you guys deserve like a huge shout out for that. And then when it comes to creator content or the future of platforms, it's amazing. Right? Jason and I are going to be the traditional media guys in another 5 years probably, but what they're doing is really pushing the forefront of technology and where content is coming from. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Randy. Well, we try. We try at least. But it's true. It's Web3 tends to be a bit of a bubble. So if any of you have tried Web3 projects before, Web3 products rather, if you have a Coinbase account, for instance, or if you've traded NFTs, you understand how hard it is to use these products. And part of that is just the fault of the industry. We haven't thought very much about user experience. It's getting better, but we haven't been very good at that. But the other piece is it's almost like living in Siberia or living in New York City. It is a badge of honor to be in crypto, that you have to fight so hard for a basic transaction. You have to really believe in the industry to be there. Now, obviously, if your ambition is to get adoption at scale, that no longer works. But certainly for this coming period, because it is still a crypto winter, prices for all the tokens are just not as high as they used to be. It's a good time to build. You'll hear a lot of Web3 crypto people saying this during this period, but it really is a good time for you to be thoughtful about the products that you're building. Make sure that you're actually delivering value, because I'll tell you that during crypto summer or 2021, 2020, when all the treasuries of the projects are really filling up because their token prices were skyrocketing, what they would try to do is get adoption by brute force. So they would go to a game studio, for instance, or they would go to an agency and say to them, I will give you a grant, not an investment. I'm not asking for any equity. I'm going to give you money, essentially. All you have to do is build your project on our protocol. And I mean, some of these grant figures were astronomical. Game studios would go to somebody like a Solana, let's say, one of the big protocols. And, I have a MOBA game, so it's a fast-paced first-person shooter game. And I need 10 million over the course of 3 years to develop this, no problem. On the protocol side, they were not gaming experts, so they were kind of taken for a ride. But on the game studio side, they were also, to their credit, not really understanding what the potential of Web3 was for their games. Everyone was trying this learning exercise. That's all gone now, because there is no $10 million grant anymore. So people are thinking very carefully about how do you build a Web3 product that's going to actually have staying power. that'll be a game or an entertainment project that will last beyond a year or so of people getting into the trend. So it's a good time for us to be thinking through these things, and I'm excited by all the creativity that's happening.
Do you have thoughts on what needs to be built?
So I think that the temptation for a lot of developers right now, because they're coming from what we call Web 2, which everyone else knows as the internet, is let's just replicate what we did in Web 2 in Web 3. So in other words, is there a Unity or an Unreal, which is a game engine, very popular in Web 2? Can we basically replicate that in Web 3? But the truth of the matter is that Web 3 is entirely different. The whole point of Web 3 is decentralization. And so when you start to import so much of the frameworks and the mindsets, the technologies that govern Web 2, which is a centralized internet, it doesn't maximize the potential of this technology. So I think that the tools around interoperability are about to get technical for a second, but the tools around interoperability will really unleash the next wave of innovation in Web3. Right now, internet, you don't think about the background infrastructure at all. It just works. In Web3, you actually have to think about which protocol you're on. Am I on Solana? Am I on Ethereum? Am I on Avalanche? Am I on Cosmos, et cetera? How we get to users actually flooding in and being able to use these products relatively painlessly is all these protocols can speak to one another, and that's what interoperability is all about. So over and above anything on the application level with respect to gaming and entertainment or DeFi or whatever the actual use case is, I think the plumbing around interoperability is crucial for this next period.
We're going to come back to Web3 in a minute, but I do want to touch more on streaming because we do have Jason and Randy here with great insights. So, okay, both of you have had this prediction that there's going to be more consolidation in the space. We're going to have 4 major streaming players to dominate the market. How are people going to survive in this competitive environment? And by people, I mean the corporations, right? Like the Warner Brothers Discovery, the Paramount Plus, the Apple TV Plus, like consumers, like you said, they have like 7 or so subscriptions. I'm a consumer. I feel like that's too many. Honestly, I can't even keep track of all the subscriptions I have. My husband has a spreadsheet for us for what we're paying for right now. So after a certain point, consumers are now like, okay, well, it'd be kind of nice to have something like cable, right? Where you have everything in one spot and you don't have to think about all these different subscriptions. So what's the winning strategy? Is it AVOD? Is it a hybrid model? Is it SVOD? What are your insights?
First of all, I'll say that I don't think anyone really knows, and I think if they say they know, they're lying. Basically, there's a lot of experimentation going on right now. You're seeing lots of diverse business models out there. And so, for example, Netflix 3 years ago said we'll never have an ad-supported tier. Now they're launching an ad-supported tier. Disney Plus following suit, an ad-supported tier. There's annual plans. There's 99-cent discounts. There's bundling of Disney, Hulu, and ESPN. And so everyone's experimenting and trying to figure it out. I think it is going to be really challenging, and I think the major media companies know this when it comes to the revenue that is being generated on traditional media today and porting that over. They have to be global. They have to get hundreds of millions of subscribers subscribing on an ongoing basis, never canceling, in order to sort of make up those revenues that they made through pay TV and subscriber fees and things like that. It's going to be really challenging, and I think that's why consolidation at the end of the day, you still got to believe that content is king, and if you have the content and you're bringing it to the user base, that they'll be there. And they're, at the end of the day, the user is really going to want value and choice. And so the choice of the content that they want, and they want to get it cheaper than they're paying for pay TV cable right now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, at some point, the consolidation becomes a natural piece. I think the last several years in streaming has all been predicated on growth and how fast you can grow, and there's been a lot of pressure to go acquire customers almost at any cost. And at some point, in my opinion, there's going to be some reckoning, right? Everything has to slow. It's unsustainable, that level of growth. And on top of that, if when you go through tougher economic times, your ability to continue spending when you don't have that same type of reward for that growth is going to change. I do think, again, as there's more contraction on the subscription streaming side, there becomes more opportunity on the ad-supported side. obviously folks like Netflix and others are starting to move more into ad support as well. That allows people to stretch their dollar a little bit further and still get more on the entertainment side. I think the other thing that we haven't talked about that will probably change over time, and I'm sure Roku will be one of the big platforms that help to, is how do you really start to sort out meta search, right? How do you really start to leverage things like AI and people's consumer behavior to really start to do better content recommendations? Because at the end of the day, there are so many services, and it becomes almost unwieldy for a consumer today to actually know what content and where and when. And so I do feel like there's going to be a lot of change just in that area alone of leveraging things like AI and consumer signal to help really put the right content in front of the right folks.
Yeah, I'll also say that I think it's going to unfortunately get worse before it gets better for the user. Your spreadsheets will just get bigger for a little while, and you can imagine that if you're a sports fan like I am, that's a perfect example of how hard it is to find the game you want to watch and what platform to go to and what you need to sign up for and what time it's happening. It's a complete mess right now, and I think it's going to continue to get fragmented before it gets better, but I think it will start to get better over time.
Yeah.
Love that. I'll
double down on Excel.
Tina, let's talk a little bit about social media here. Have you heard of Be Real?
Yeah, I love you. I'm like, I wish I had my phone. My Be Real went off right now.
So I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, the younger generation, they're all about authenticity and like being your truest self. They love that. Be Real is just, you can be your authentic self on social media, unlike, some people say Instagram is a lot more tailored and people are thinking a lot more about the post. So when you're thinking about social media in that space, how are you making sure you're reaching all demographics, being inclusive and, including the AAPI community as well?
So from a media point of view, because I work on the partnership side, like I was saying earlier, we really value safety and well-being. So there's a really strong emphasis on that movement right now. I think we're seeing a lot of creator burnout. And so we want to make sure that our storytellers are feeling good and positive. And we're really developing tools to help them create content in a very safe, in a safe and happy way. There is content creation fatigue. Secondly, I think there is this proliferation right now of many diverse storytellers, and I think just helping to find those stories, right, and put them front and center, and help bring conversation to the platform. I think, if anything, more diverse content allows us to better understand each other. I'm not going to ask you to totally relate to my upbringing and my background, but if you know stories similar to mine, you're going to be much more empathetic to it. And I think there's that movement of growing empathy, right? Just by learning. And so just trying to help surface and accelerate storytellers that might not normally be fed into the algorithm. So yeah, I think that's really important. And you're right. I think Gen Z is really focused on authentic connections, and I actually continue to see that. I think that's why platforms prior to like MySpace back in the day, right? You're able to have these one-on-one connections with these creators. Gen Z doesn't fangirl over movie stars like we do. And is movie stars even
Very
a cool word to say? They really connect with creators. And these are people, or these are kids who grew up on screens. And if you watch old MySpace videos or YouTube videos, or even the creators right now, it's a very intimate connection. You're on your phone, and it's a couple inches away from you, and you are listening to this creator talk about whatever it is that they're passionate about, and you're connecting with that. And you can always find something to connect with on social, which is really powerful. And I don't think I think studios and stuff need to start thinking differently about how to connect with audience. It's not going to be. It's just new media. Mm-hmm. I'm sure back in the day when we introduced color and sound, right?
Back in the day.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say Friendster.
I remember Friendster, yeah.
So I have no concept of time because we're having such a great conversation, and I'm wondering if I'm on track with time. But let's get a pulse check. Anyone have any questions for our panelists? I feel like we have good. Okay, let's start with the person in the red.
Hi, I'm Yasna. I actually am a content creator myself, and Gen Z. But so you kind of touched upon this a little bit earlier, but what do you think the role of advertisement is going to be, especially as social media pulls in a lot more long-form content? TikTok recently just introduced, I believe, 10-minute clips, and I'm sure it'll probably be longer and longer. YouTube, obviously, you can go on for as long as you want. And, you know, especially as we see more of the democratization of content creation, how do you see, you know, these social medias and also, you know, just like the traditional streaming platforms, how do you kind of see advertising playing that role?
Yeah.
Who wants to take it?
I'll start. Yeah. So it's hugely important. I think when you think about advertising and advertising dollars, there's always going to be a place for that. It's going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to be important. If you think about, you know, traditional TV, broadcast TV, cable TV, there's still billions of dollars being spent there. They don't really measure audience very well in comparison to social platforms like Facebook or streaming platforms like Roku. And I think dollars are going to continue to shift away from TV as subscribers of pay TV go away. They're losing over 1 million subscribers on a quarterly basis right now, and it's accelerating. So all those advertisers and advertising dollars are definitely going to shift to streaming platforms and also to social platforms. You know, there's an interesting sort of story behind when you think back to the recession of 2006, 2007 era. TV was booming. I actually worked at CBS back in the day during that time period. Advertising dollars completely shrunk up, but they were being spent on Facebook and on Google because everyone was trying to get more bang for their dollar. And so they wanted to be able to measure, I spent $1, what did that dollar do for me? On TV, you can't really do that. And so I think this is the next iteration of that, and I think that's going to continue. I think with the economic downturn, advertising dollars are starting to decline. And so I think that same trend is going to happen where advertisers will say, where can I measure my dollar being spent the best? And they're going to go to digital platforms. And I actually think once the economy slowly starts to recover, you're going to see an acceleration of advertising dollars on these digital platforms. So I'm a big believer in it.
I think along those lines, advertisers are going to continue to look for ways to connect with consumers. And so either via like streaming platforms, digital platforms. I think like audiences are diversified across many content touch points now. And so, yes, you know, advertising can come to like Facebook and Instagram and really like target their specific audience, but they're going to look for new ways to do that. And I think like that's where creators across all platforms are going to really benefit, because they're going to want to tap into your communities, right? They're going to, like, you've already built trust with your audience, and that's how you as a content creator is going to make money. And I think we'll start to kind of see people test different or brands test different formats, just because it's so hard now to like connect with consumers, because there's so many different ways you can.
I'm so sorry, unfortunately, that is all the time we have, but our panelists will be sticking around, so if you have questions, come find them afterwards. Thank you so much for being so attentive. Please give it up to our amazing panelists.